What is going on, everybody? It has been a really, really long time since I had Sterling Bennett on the channel talking 49ers, 49er Access, if you know him by Twitter or YouTube. But it really just comes down to the fact that we're going to have to break down what we just witnessed over the last 4 months and try to make some sense of it, try to look at the bright side going forward into next season and all that stuff. But before we do that, I just wanted to ask you how you are doing.
I'm doing good. I terrible having to watch them lose 47 to 24 to end an already lost or disgusting season. But other than that, I am actually very hopeful for 2025. I think they'll bounce back. We'll get into that, I'm sure, later in the show. But bad year, terrible year, just the worst you can possibly think of for a team that had Super Bowl aspirations. But other than that, my eyes are definitely towards the new year, trying to put this 2024 season in the rear view mirror.
Yeah, this has been about as bad. I mean, I've been a fan 35 years. I'm 45, so I've been a fan since I was 10. We've had some bangers of a season and we've had some pretty down one. This has to be coming off of a Super Bowl appearance and a previous year NFC Championship game appearance where we really didn't have a shot because our quarterback got hurt. Those last two seasons were about as fulfilling and great as you could get as a 49ers fan, minus not winning a Super Bowl. Um, to be honest with you, going into the offseason after the loss of the Super Bowl, I was about as depressed as I've ever been after a 49ers loss in a long
Hmm.
time. And I kept asking myself, do the players feel the same way? Will it be hard for them to remotivate themselves? Can they catch lightning in a bottle with all the injuries? All that stuff. And it was a quote that I heard a couple days ago from Debo Samuel, where he said he was depressed all offseason and he didn't want to talk to anybody and getting it was hard getting over a Super Bowl loss to a team twice, especially with the last one being that they lost it in overtime. And I kind of got the answer to that question. And then you add in injuries and you add in tragedy and essentially you get the 2024 Niners 6-11 and a lot of questions going forward.
Well, it's funny you bring it up in regards to Debo Samuel and this team losing a Super Bowl to the same team twice. Fish and Chips in the YouTube chat says only 3 times has a Super Bowl loser not returned to the playoffs the next year. Shanahan has done it twice. So not great. But yeah, I can't say I was in that group in regards to feeling depressed about losing. Obviously, it sucked. Maybe I had some rose tinted glasses on, like, oh, we still have CMC and Purdy, and like we're gonna be just as good or somewhere around there. Like we're gonna be competitive, and I think that was still the expectation. But you go to the off season, Trent Williams is holding out, Ayuk's holding in, Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, Grendo gets hurt, Pearsall gets shot. Like so many things go wrong, and you're like, well, they can bounce back, right? They can be fine. They'll push through. They'll persevere. Then you fast forward 18 weeks and you're like, holy hell, no, they can't. But I don't know, Aaron. It just feels like this year, it felt like it was like the Niners were bound to fall eventually. The only question is, can you pick yourself back up? And I think in a year like this, where everything goes wrong, like that is almost better to me. Like, would you rather have everything go wrong for you? And, injuries, all the off the field stuff, everything just falling apart and crumbling, or would you rather be 10-6, win the division, and lose in the first round? To me, I'm like, why make the dance if you're not going to have a chance at all? Like the Buccaneers this year, what are you doing? Like, what's that? Like, seriously, the Broncos, great season, awesome for them. They had to go because they have a young quarterback, but it's like when it's all said and done, like, are they really going to have a chance? So I think I take this year kind of in stride and say, it happens sometimes. It's happened twice to this team in the last 5 years. Am I okay with it? No, but I can accept it more than not.
What do you think causes this boomer bust thing that the Niners seem to be attracted to, where it's either championship aspirations, long, deep playoff runs, or an abysmal season where everybody gets hurt and they finish with a losing record and they're picking in the top four, the top 15, top 12? It's so weird to me. And it's if I forgot who put the stat up, some well known YouTuber, but he had like I think it was 6 10-loss seasons was one of the things that he put down. And then, of course, you had all the championship game appearances and the 2 Super Bowl losses and stuff. So it's really been essentially a feast or famine situation with the 49ers. I
Which
said
is so go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
I had one of my co-hosts that I do the show, on Mondays with, that we call it the Empire State of Mind podcast because 'cause we're all like New Yorkers or New Jersey or whatever. I told him, I said, and his name's Al, I said, I'd rather us, if we're gonna lose, I mean lose, I mean, be as bad as you gotta be. Don't finish the season on a high note where they second guess bringing back Jake Moody, or they second guess bringing back the defensive coordinator and the special teams. No, if it's gonna go bad, go as bad as possible, so everything is on the table, and if you gotta make a clean sweep through some assistant coaches or your health staff or whatever that may be. So in a way, I was hoping for yesterday's outcome, but I still was pissed off when it happened. But I was kind of like you. I'd rather not be a 10-6 team, and then we're gonna get our heart broken all over again, and then it's gonna be the same old, fan base is coming at us and being like, "You guys are choke artists. You can't get out of the,
Right.
you can't win a Super Bowl. You haven't done it in 30 years and all that stuff." So yeah, I'm kind of like, if it's gonna go bad, let it go as bad as possibly can. As long as we bounce back next season. That's the thing. It has to happen.
Right. Exactly. And I think the way this year went, like yeah, it sucks. And being 6-11 is like, what the heck? But there is optimism. You're in last place, you're the 11th overall pick. You have a last place schedule next year. I think they may have the easiest schedule in the entire NFL next season. And on paper, which this year proves to mean nothing, obviously, but on paper, you're like, well, Christian McCaffrey's back healthy. He said today he was almost 100% again. Thumbs up, cool there. You get Brock on a new contract, maybe, if you like him. If you don't, he's not as bad as he was this year. At least he hasn't been in the past. And you expect more from him next year. Pearsall, year number 2. Kittle had an all-pro year this season. You get Trent Williams back for whatever that means for this left tackle situation. You get a whole new crop of rookies to come in. Like, this year was terrible. But the optimism for me is so high compared to where it would have been had you finished 10-6, 9-8, a wild card team squeaked in. Like, would you rather be the Niners, have a terrible, awful year, or be the Rams, where you get in, but you may be able to beat one team, but you really aren't the top of the list, where then you're picking in the 20s. And it's like, well, we can't get that left tackle. We don't get that star edge rusher. We don't get the top cornerback or whatever they may want out there in LA. Like, I'd rather be the San Francisco 49ers, take a year off, get healthy, have the entire off season, January to about June or July, to rest, relax, get not depressed after the off season and figure things out and hopefully self-scout your team. And like I said, make those coaching changes, those staff changes. Because look, 2025, a lot can change. And I think the Niners are at a really good spot. Well, yes, coming off a down year, like just trying to be optimistic ahead. It's like, are the Seahawks going to be competitive? They got Geno still. Like, they're going to have some turnover. The Rams are getting older. Is Matthew Stafford going to retire? I don't think he will. Those are certainly rumors out there. And the Cardinals are the Cardinals still, which we lost to them twice this year, but I don't believe in them too much. So I really love where San Francisco's at, knowing, at least in my mind, they should be able to bounce back next season.
Yeah, that's the goal. I mean, my brother's a Dolphins fan, and they just pretty much said that they're gonna stay status quo with their GM and their coach. And my brother is just like, it's gonna be another failed season, another status quo Dolphin season where they don't do well, and the head coach is fumbling for words in press conferences, and they bad draft. They're a lot like the Niners. They don't seem to have this. They have this obsession with playmakers, and they don't want to draft offensive line. Their quarterback's hurt all the time, kind of like the Niners. And so, I mean, he's definitely in more of a negative headspace. I told him everything is pointing in the right direction for the Niners, but it still has to happen. I guess one of the first things on the docket that I have here is coaching changes. The two being, and I know there's people out there. There's a guy that has a 24/7 49ers channel. I don't trust who that person is, so I'm not going to say that that's some breaking
Neither do
news
I.
is about to happen. But whether it's a fictitious report or not, it essentially says that they're going to move on. And I think Matt Maiocco was quoted as saying that they're probably going to move on from both defensive coordinator and special teams. I mean, if that isn't the easiest decision to make based on what we saw this season, I mean, special teams yesterday giving up another fake punt in one season. That's two is like way too much, right? One is one is pretty bad, and two in one season is almost unacceptable. So there's that, and so I figure whatever one you want to tackle first, whether defensive coordinator or uh, special teams.
Well, let's get the first easy one out of the way. I am like you. You have to be convinced they're going to fire Brian Schneider. Like, if there's one person to go, if you had to pick Sorensen or Schneider, Schneider has to go. Like, you can forgive some of Sorensen's debacles here or there. It's not great. He has to fix some things, but at least you can make the excuse of, well, Hufanga was hurt on and off during the year. Greenlaw missed almost the entirety of the season. Some of the free agents they signed didn't live up to the expectation they had. Hargrave got hurt early. Like, Mooney Ward wasn't great the entire year. Like, you can make some excuses here or there for Nick Sorensen. Kind of fell into the job. It really wasn't like they didn't want him. They were like, oh, well, we didn't get Belichick. We didn't get Ulbrich. We didn't get whoever else. Like, oh, crap. Like, well, Sorensen, go in there and figure things out, and we'll give you Brandon Staley and hope this thing works. But I do think for Brian Schneider, he has to go. Like, this special teams unit has cost the Niners around 60 points this year over the expectation. By far the worst unit in all of football, whether it's missed field goals, blocked kicks, blocked punts, like whatever else it may be, just botched kickoffs by Jake Moody twice in one game. It's like all of that has to change. All of it. And I know it's not just the coaches, because it can't just be the coaching, but you look at what Brian Schneider has done. I will always point to this. And while I do think Jake Moody will come back next year with competition in training camp, he is the one that said Jake Moody had the perfect workout. That, like, they talked to Brian Schneider and said, hey, we're going kicker in the third round. Are you sure? He was like, yep, that's the guy. He'll be the guy. He'll be great. Well, if we are to use the quarterback head coach combo and say, well, if a head coach and a GM draft a quarterback and they're a bust, what happens? They usually get fired, right? Why shouldn't the same be held for Brian Schneider when he drafted a kicker and that guy is the worst kicker in the entire league this past year? Like, the same thing. You have to hold your coordinators accountable, and you got to fire Brian Schneider for the debacle, the bust that has been Jake Moody.
I can't even speak on how many times I cursed out Jake Moody on my television for that just sheepish look that he has on his face, not confident. Just, oh man, and the fact that you have to get pepped up by your long snapper to make you feel better about yourself, and Kittle going out of his way to kiss his ass and tell him, he's a good guy, he's a friend. It's like, nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear that. That's great.
Happy.
I still want a new kicker.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear any of that stuff. And I love Richard Sherman, and he pretty much like, man, we live in a world where, like, people get participation trophies and stuff. Like, no, he needs to go. It's done, finished, and take the guy who is coordinating that team as well. It was an absolute debacle. Just the kickoff returns they gave up this year and punt returns, poor coverage, like you said, guy kicking stuff. How do you have a leg, but then you can't kick the ball past that line that everybody is supposed to kick it past in order to enact the new special teams rules? And like it was a comedy of errors all season long. So yeah, I'm with you. If there's one no-brainer, it's special teams. But Nick Sorensen isn't far behind. Probably one of the worst units in the league by far. I mean, you look at all the statistical categories in points, yards allowed. I mean, they're bad across the board. I think the issue I always had with Nick Sorensen is I felt like he was kind of the safe pick.
Yep.
Based on placating to diva players who don't want to learn defense from a hard, crusty, old-fashioned, like, I'm a defensive coordinator, this is what I do type coach. Instead, we bring in someone they already know, someone who's going to upset the apple cart. And essentially what you have is no accountability. And it's the same old rush 4, drop 8, and there's no spontaneity, there's no coverage disguise, there's no stunts, blitzes, anything. It's just basic ass defense every single game with no adjustments. To me, I mean, if you can't, if it was bad, it was
Yeah.
really bad. And you had, listen, the Niners were down a lot of players on defense, but they still had enough players to make things go this year. I mean, that young secondary looks pretty good. I mean, but they couldn't get after the quarterback to save their life this year, other than Nick Bosa. So, yeah. So those two are those two are no brainers.
Well, that's the thing with Nick Sorensen is I am someone, and maybe this is a fault of mine. Me and you watched every game, not together, but we watched every game apart. And I came away for a lot of the year saying, well, the defense held the opponent to 24 points. The offense can only score 17. That's a bigger problem to me.
Okay.
Now, well, I think that remains true. Like the offense to me gets, in my mind, a lot more of the blame than the defense does this year because the offense still had a leading rusher in Jordan Mason, and they got CMC back, and Grendo was hurt for a little bit in time, but then you still had George Kittle, and you had Deebo Samuel. You had a first-round pick in Pearsall and although pretty bad offensive line. They weren't terrible every single game. Quarterbacks were throwing picks here or there. Like, I looked at the offense and I said, 17 points a game, seriously? Like they were averaging 17 points a game from week 8 and beyond until I think it was maybe the Dolphins game or the Lions game. They were bad offensively. That said, the defense this year, the way it ended, just I don't know how you excuse it. Now, again, like you were saying, you can point to, well, Sorensen was their fourth choice, right? He essentially was the Devondre Campbell of defensive coordinators this year. He just didn't quit on the team on the sideline. Like, they wanted Michael Kendricks. They wanted somebody else at linebacker, according to Kyle Shanahan. They had to settle for Devondre Campbell. The Niners wanted Belichick. They wanted Jeff Ulbrich. They had to settle for Nick Sorensen. And is that Sorensen's fault? No. But when you're in this weird kind of crossroads of like do or die, gotta figure this thing out now. Because if we don't, we're paying a quarterback. We got to pay Christian McCaffrey. It seems like they're going to extend George Kittle, might extend Kyle Juszczyk. And then you have Trent Williams, who's kind of a ticking time bomb of, are you going to retire? Are you going to play? How's the ankle going to be next year? Like, you have to win next year. And I don't know about you, Aaron, but I don't believe Nick Sorensen is that guy that can help your defense not just be a top 5 unit, but be good enough to actually be competitive and keep you in games week in, week out.
I think the one thing, and you brought up offense, the one thing I will say is they're going into next season. They're going to start this offseason with almost $60 million under the cap.
Yeah.
Before they do anything. And that's before any type of player movement or re-signings or anything. So I think cap wise for the next couple of years, I would assume Brock Purdy's cap hit is going to be relatively low. The cap is going up. So I'm not really worried what they're going to do with the roster wise, but yeah, just a lot of questions with certain players like, man, Trent Williams, you hold out, you get all this money, and then you really barely played this year and you were hurt the whole time. And then, of course, you have the tragedy with your child. And then it's like you can't even be mad at him. You can separate it, but it makes you look like a jerk if you do. They got into a position where they had to settle for the last possible pick a defensive coordinator. And then to chop it all off, they bring Staley in as well. And I always look at that as the quarterback thing. If you have two, you have none. To me, if you have two defensive coordinators, you don't have one. You need to have a defined person in that role. That's why I always love teams who get a guy who is a crusty, he's been in the league a long time. He tried to be a head coach. It didn't work. And he's had to settle on being a defensive coordinator. He's accepted that fate. Why they never, I know Wilks, listen, when I look back at Wilks, he had a bad Super Bowl and he called a bad Super Bowl, but that defense was pretty damn good underneath.
He called one bad half of the Super Bowl. That first half, they were locking them Kansas City Chiefs down.
Yeah, we were, but I was also Greenlaw was in there too. So that
right.
The whole dynamic of that defense changed once Greenlaw went out. I think Greenlaw, once he went out in that Super Bowl, I think the Niners' testicular fortitude went with it. So, but that's a whole other discussion. they have to clean house. They have to. They have to make a move at both defensive and special teams. But I agree with you with the offense. And, you can put the blame on the offensive line. And, Brock had a down year, which I think young quarterbacks have. I mean, you can look at,
Sure.
and I know people are going to say, how could you make the comparison? The guy's elite, but there was a point in time where Josh Allen was throwing a lot of interceptions, like a lot of interceptions. And he was a younger quarterback, and he fixed that, and he's gotten way better. There's no doubt in my mind, one, because the kid cares, and two, because Kyle Shanahan is locked in with them. That's their quarterback. I feel like Brock is going to be better for it this season coming back next year. So I think he's going to be a better player. And yeah, the offense had a lot of people in and out of the lineup. And then, again, the offensive line, it was in shambles this year. It was porous. It was about as bad as you can get. So this year went about as bad as it could go on defense and special teams, and even with the offense. So I'm usually a glass half empty type of individual, but I'm like you. I have a weird sense of like optimism going in, not only to the season, but like into free agency and into the draft. I think the Niners, are going to be reasonably competitive in free agency. I know they'll sign a lot of their own guys, but I wouldn't be surprised, if they go after, a couple players that we don't see coming, maybe a free safety to shore up the back end, or a center. Kyle's not big on drafting centers and having them play. So there's some things there before we even get into the meat of, next season.
Do you think that Kyle Shanahan would actually fire a defensive coordinator in back-to-back seasons? Would he put that egg on his face in back-to-back years and go, yep, that's on me?
Probably not. Knowing Kyle and how he's a very, very haughty and very, very arrogant individual.
Sure.
But you can't stay on him, right? You can't. There's no way. I mean, can you keep Staley and let Sorensen go? Do they go? You know what I mean? That would be scary.
I mean, Gus Bradley got fired today.
Yeah,
Rumo got fired today.
No, Gus
Don't. But to be fair, although I don't want to hire Gus Bradley, Kyle Shanahan was hot on him a few years ago. I believe it was 2 years ago before they hired Steve Wilkes. Bradley was a guy they wanted to bring in. He was in Seattle. He ran the Legion of Boom stuff with Pete Carroll and company. So, there is credence to maybe Shanahan saying, hey, if I can't get Saleh, if I can't get Ulbrich, you do the same thing. My only concern really, I don't know what exactly Brandon Staley added to this team this year. I know he was like the nickelback coach, which whether it was Lenore or Green, they played great all year long as nickelback. So
yes, they did.
It's kind of hard for me to criticize a coach. I don't know exactly what he was involved in. I know Steve Wilkes last year was heavily involved in the secondary, and they played great last year, whether it was Brown or Gibson or Lenore and Mooney Ward last year. Like all those guys played great. Like my concern is not really the back seven, it's the front four.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you were to maybe have an opinion that Nick Sorensen may return or has a chance to return next year, the one thing they're going to have to do is fix the front four. Now, you can bring back Leonard Floyd, fine. You can bring back Jordan Elliott, fine. You can bring back Hargrave, fine. You can bring back Collins, cool. You got to find a run-defending interior defensive lineman. DJ Jones will be a free agent. Want to bring him back? Let's do that. You can look at an edge rusher. You have pick number 11. Do you want to go right tackle or do you want to get the edge rusher? In a win now year, I have a feeling they'll pick edge rusher. Now, again, I have no idea exactly what their mindset is, but in a year where you have to win, you got to make sure you nail that hiring, because what you can't do is you can't hire Wilkes and fire him after you get to the Super Bowl and he calls, a couple bad games here or there, which, okay, fine. Then you fire Sorensen because you missed your first three guys you wanted to hire. Then you fire the third guy you hire. That's the one thing you can't do. When you do that, it's okay. There's a different problem here, and it probably comes down to personnel. So I don't want to say Sorensen's gone, but I do think there is a small possibility he may be back in 2025.
I have a sneaky suspicion that you are right, and I feel the same way, and I hate to admit it. There's just part of me that thinks he wasn't playing with a full deck,
Yeah,
and they're gonna notice that, and they're going to, they're gonna go back and look at all the film because that's what they do after the season. They go back and watch
right.
tape. They're gonna do it. Kyle said he wanted to do it with Brock, and I want to get to Brock in a minute. As far as like he wanted to go back and watch a lot of tape with Brock and really, where there's no pressure, they just go watch film and stuff after the season. I'm sure they're gonna watch cut ups of the defense and be like, well, no, I mean, we were really
Right. If
compromised at linebacker and
if
defensive
we had
line. So
Greenlaw, that wouldn't be a problem, right? Like it's a very easy argument to make. No Hufanga, Mooney Ward down year, no Greenlaw, Devondre Campbell starting, and no edge rusher opposite Nick Bosa and Hargrave gets hurt. Like, I don't love that being the argument, but it certainly is an easy one to make when you want to talk about bringing back Nick Sorensen.
yeah, I'm for him being fired because I just think that if you stay the same, they say if you never stay the same, you either get better or worse. And I think if they stay the same, they will be worse for it.
Who's
Uh,
who's like your wish list defensive coordinator then?
uh, Albrecht is kind of up there with me.
Okay.
In a perfect world, Jim Schwartz maybe.
Hmm.
And if he wasn't a head coach candidate, I would bring in a guy like Vrabel in a second, but that's never going to happen.
Okay.
Just those are kind of my three. Vrabel's going to be a coach. I'm surprised if he's the coach of the Jets next year. I could almost,
Yeah.
I could almost
Or the
taste
or the
it.
Patriots. Or the
Or the
Patriots.
Patriots. I forgot about that. That's true.
Would you be
Schwartz,
opposed to signing like Gerard Mayo or someone like that? I'm not even saying I would do that. I'm just saying like throwing names out there.
uh, does it matter what they run? Does it matter who they get if they're going to run the same tired drop 8 cover,
Hmm.
blitz 4 every play? Like, or does Kyle get out of his comfort zone finally and abandon the cover 3 defense and go with a more aggressive, like heavy blitz or man coverage type scheme? Like, I'm getting kind of sick of no matter who it is we bring in, they're forced to run the same Seattle cover 3 defense. And he's like, oh, it gave me the most problems. But a lot of people in the league have figured it out, except for Kyle apparently. But the thing with that is it's like you had these elite Hall of Fame level players on that defense. And it's like
Yeah.
this whole thing of trying to replicate something that will never be replicated, that was a special team at a special time with that defense. But knowing Kyle and then knowing how stubborn he is, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Sorensen is back next year just because he can't fire 2 defense coordinators in back-to-back seasons. So I don't know.
Let me ask you this, and it's the last defensive question coordinator I have for you. He was fired early in the year, and there's a comment in the YouTube chat by Benali P, and I completely agree with them. What about Matt Eberflus? I get it, the Bears were terrible. Some guys aren't made to be head coaches in the NFL, but we saw that defense save their season plenty of times. And then we saw when they fired him, that defense completely fall apart. I don't even know if that would work. I haven't looked into it at all, but I do believe that maybe you get a coordinator that has a failed head coach. Like you said, he's not going to get poached elsewhere, but like no one's hiring Eberflus. And don't forget, Eberflus was the Colts defensive coordinator a couple years ago. Then he got hired to be in Chicago. So I do think there may be an avenue there in regards to someone that nobody's talking about.
How what Cheapto says he's a 4-3 guy, I think. And David McNiner, I'm down with this.
No
No
wide
more
nine.
wide 9. I think I've seen enough of the wide 9 to last me the rest of my life. I just feel like the bloom is off the rose on that particular thing. This whole like, what did it produce? It didn't produce anything this year. They had one of their worst years getting to the quarterback in a long time. So this whole wide 9 thing, I think it saw better days. Plus, it's in the run game, it's an absolute. They
Terrible.
gouge you. You got your tackle. You have your ends and your tackles split so wide that I don't know. It's the Niners and Kyle and John. They like to do things that are familiar, that have gotten them places before.
Safe.
And they like to be safe. They don't ever, and and we're not saying make change for change's sake or
Sure.
do something out of the box or out of the out of the ordinary just for the sake of it. No, do it because what you've been doing recently really hasn't been working, and you have to make a drastic move to try to change things for the better. But I just don't know if, like you said, Sorensen being back next year, and they could use the excuse that he didn't have a full deck, he wasn't playing with Greenlaw, blah blah blah. I really hope that's not the case. From Mayoko's point of view, and he's pretty locked in.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people I trust who talk Niners because a lot of them have a narrative to push on their YouTube channel. Mayoko's not one of those guys, so kind of trusting what he has to say. Someone like him and Barros, they're kind of in the inside, so hopefully he's right. And because you said this when we were thinking about streaming, he goes, "Oh, great! Maybe the longer we push the stream, maybe there'll be some firings earlier in the day or something." Unfortunately, that hasn't happened yet because I think they had some meetings today. So
Yeah.
maybe tomorrow there's some news, maybe Thursday, but let's hope Mayoko was on the ball in that one.
Well, I think usually John and Kyle talk the day after the last game of the season. I know it's been a while since we've seen that in the regular season, but I do think it was odd that they didn't talk today when all the rest of the players did. That to me tells me that they're going to go through the process and see and kind of, comb the coaching staff and say, you get to stay and you can get your walking papers later on this week.
Yeah. Hey, anybody who's watching on either mine or Sterling Bennett's YouTube channel, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. It really helps. YouTube is a busy, busy place for 49ers content. So even a simple like, share, comment, subscribe, it really helps. Maybe add one or two more people to watching the channel because that's usually all the people that watch my channel at this point. But, just saying.
Oh, don't sell yourself short, Aaron. Don't sell it short.
But I wanted to move into the Brock Purdy contract situation. It's the giant elephant in the room. We can agree to disagree that, there's people out there that say you're not going to pay him top of the market money. There's people like me who say it's not my money and the market is the market. And if you come to the table with anything less than a respectable offer, there's a good chance Brock and his agent are going to be like, screw you, man. Like, are you kidding me? Brock said he wants to get it done quickly and avoid off-season drama. I don't know if that was a subtle dig at all the guys that held out this offseason, but he is the leader of. Hey, I look at Brock as one of the leaders of this team. So dropping a little bit of a zinger there. What is your take? I mean, what is Sterling's thought on paying Brock?
Well, he's going to get paid, and like you said, it's not my money. That said, do I think that in a way Brock Purdy deserves a record-breaking $65 million a year? No, but neither did Dak Prescott, neither did Trevor Lawrence, neither did Tua Tagovailoa, and Brock has been better than all those quarterbacks just through 2.5, 3 years of being a starter. The market is the market. That said, I do think Brock's comments today maybe didn't give us too much insight into what those negotiations will look like, but you can tell as a player that has seen Brandon Ayuk hold out, has seen Trent Williams hold out, he said, I don't want to deal with that. He saw this past year what it was like to not have his number one receiver, his starting left tackle, to have his running back on and off the field due to injury and contract negotiations. He said, nope, that potentially cost us a major part of the year. Imagine that Brandon Ayuk been in there every single day and still got paid. Maybe he still gets hurt, whatever, that's fine. But the first 7 or 6-ish games they play, he's locked and ready to go. Maybe they beat the Vikings. Maybe they beat the Rams. Maybe they are in a better place to beat the Cardinals later on in the year and aren't fighting for, the final wild card spot in like week 14. Maybe they are ahead of the wild card. Maybe they're winning the division. I think Brock saw the domino effect that holding out caused for this team. And I think he's saying, look, I'm not waiting till the draft. I want to get this thing out of the way. I do think it lends to Brock not making as much as $65 million or surpassing Dak's contract. I do think it does kind of open that door for not a team-friendly deal, but kind of a $55 million deal.
I
A
could,
it,
yeah.
and so I just love that statement he made today. It made a lot of sense. It was a leader-like statement of like, look, I'm not playing the game. I want to win. I want to be here. Let's get this thing ironed out because I'm ready to rock in 2025.
Yeah, I got the same notion from him. He's a he's a faith-based man, but he's also a pretty mature person for being only 25 years old. Listen, there's a lot of talk out there, and I say if you're going to worry about the cap and all that stuff, go talk to my guy Jason Hurley on Twitter. He's a cap guy. He knows all this stuff about the cap. A lot of people are really scared that the Niners are going to be in cap hell and then they're not going to be able to make moves and this and this and that. Listen, first of all, we have Parag Marafe at the helm of contracts. He's the best in the freaking game. Even when you think the guy's getting paid a lot of money by the organization, and in the end, there's always an out, there's always a clause, there's always escalators, there's always this, there's always that. Plus the cap's going up. Plus, like I said, the Niners are going into the offseason before they pay Brock with almost $60 million under the cap before any moves are made. Maybe a Debo doesn't come back. Maybe a Juszczyk doesn't come back. Maybe a Hargrave doesn't come back. Maybe Aaron Banks is no longer going to be here. There's things like that. Guys get re-signed. Cap goes up. Don't worry about the cap. It's going to be fine. They're going to have enough money to still put a good team around them. And yeah, I'm kind of with you. I don't see him taking a team-friendly deal
No.
for the sake of doing what's best for the 49ers. I feel like like a $55 million a year contract is a pretty fair contract. It's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
I just don't know. To me, it's more of his agent. Like, what does his agent have in mind? And how I don't know his agent personally. I don't know who else he works with. You'd have to go based on track records with other players to see if he's kind of a dirty dog negotiator like some of these guys have.
Yeah, he's not
Who,
Tory Dandy.
who's that?
Debo Samuel's agent, Tory Dandy.
Well, at least he ain't that guy. The one thing that really bothered me this offseason about all the contract stuff too is all the guys that got contract extensions all got hurt. Every
Yeah.
single one of them.
Yeah.
And I know there was tragedy that happened, and I want to get to that in a bit. But like every single guy that got a bump in pay was either knocked out for the season or missed a majority of games in the season. And that's Trent, Chris McCaffrey, and Brandon Ayuk. And so for Brock to be like, let's just get this thing done, please. I don't care. I think a lot of 49er fans are like peeing in their pajamas right now, being like, thank God, finally.
Yeah.
Let's not let this thing run until July, August. Like, really? Just based on the vibe of coming out of the Super Bowl last year and all the contract stuff, and then Ricky Pearsall getting shot.
Yeah.
It was the vibes going into this season. And I know a lot of people got on Manti Te'o for going on NFL
he was
Network
right.
and saying a bunch of funny stuff, and people are like, "Man, what you talking about, man? You got catfished by a fake woman, right?" But he was right. He was right. I said bad. I was critical of him. I thought he was just hating. I thought he was just putting out news into the ether for people to consume. No, he was 100% right. This team, something was off this year. And so, hopefully Brock and his agent do what's best for the 49ers and get a deal done quickly.
And I think with Brock, the one thing I like about his comments today, it sets the precedent for what needs to be an all-in year from every single player. From the front office, the head coach, defensive coordinator, the players on the roster, you got to be all in day one, be ready to go. And I think Brock, wanted to get ahead of things, and we'll see what actually happens come this offseason. But, the franchise tag is around $40 million this year for quarterbacks, I think, which is why people are debating, what happens with Sam Darnold in Minnesota. But, for Brock, I don't look at it from a AAV or a per year average in regards to what blows me away or what he's looking for. I think if you're Brock, you are completely open to a lower per year average of money if you're getting a higher guarantee. And I know fans look at, oh, he's making $65 million a year. Yeah, but if he's making 185, $200 million guaranteed, who cares? Like, I will make $30 million a year guaranteed for 5 years, whatever that money comes out to numerically, but I'll get a higher guarantee. That only helps me in the long
Yeah,
run.
his
So
base salary might be $5 to $8 million,
yeah,
and his signing bonus might be, his per year bonus might be, 45 million.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
if that's the
And
case, go for a giant bonus and give him a cheap, yearly deal. It'll be somewhere in the middle, I think. I don't think they're gonna, just blow their stack and just make it all. But they are good with giving, pretty sizely, roster bonuses for signings. So we're gonna find out in a couple of months. Hopefully, it's not a 6-month thing. One thing that really bothered me, and I wanted to get your opinion on this. I tweeted this. I said people live in such a reaction, like a overreaction world where we overreact to the current thing that's happening and we overreact to it. And that is Brian Baldinger saying, "Oh, if I would do it, I would trade Brock right now for Sam Darnold and bring him back to the 49ers."
yeah,
And this is a quarterback who has been bad his whole career, except for this year. And you're willing to sacrifice all of that for a guy who is the last pick in the draft, who makes no money, who in back-to-back seasons, definitely people could say whatever you want about having the Avengers, helped you get to a championship game and had the lead going into overtime in the Super Bowl, or they had the lead when he left the field in the Super Bowl. He helped you get there. He was responsible in that NFC championship game on making sure that they came back. And then you're going to all of a sudden say, oh man, if I'm the 49ers, I'm seriously looking into bringing someone like Darnold back to the 49ers. It's just, we live in this world of overreaction. I just wanted to get your take on that, because I wanted to punch a hole in my TV, man. Like, what is it with people and just reacting to things that are happening right now, as opposed to looking at the giant body of work that we have in front of us?
the Sam Darnold bring him to San Francisco conversation is so interesting to me because, you know, a lot of that is kind of predicated by completely erasing everything Brock Purdy has done the last 2 years and only focusing on this season.
Yes.
And to me, that is crazy. And because you're not doing that with other quarterbacks that you're going to pay big money to. Now, yes, some teams have buyer's remorse. I'm sure the Jaguars do. I'm sure the Dolphins certainly do. The Cowboys are a whole different animal themselves, so maybe put them aside. But I don't think San Francisco, if they pay Brock Purdy, is going to have buyer's remorse, depending on what the contract looks like and how successful they are with him. That said, I just don't love the idea of praising a player for having one phenomenal year. Darnold's been great this year, like 14 and what, 3, whatever they are this year, in crazy year. But and I was having this conversation on the air, 95.7 The Game with my boy Dan Devone. He was pro Darnold. Oh, I'll bring Sam back. He'll be cheaper. The arm strength, the mobility, and all that may be true. He might be cheaper. He might have the better arm. He certainly is mobile. He beat San Francisco this year in Minnesota. Like, all that may be true, but come playoff time, as we saw last night, who is Sam Darnold? I don't know. I know who Brock Purdy is come playoff time. He's won 4 playoff games. He's got you to a Super Bowl. Sam Darnold's never even played in a playoff game. Why would if you believe you have the guy in the room, which maybe you don't, maybe you don't believe in Brock Purdy, that's fine. But if you believe he's got the guy in the room in Brock Purdy, why would you even open the door for a conversation to even think about bringing Sam Darnold back? They had him in the room with Brock Purdy, and they allowed him to leave. They had him. If they loved him so much, they could have kept him and had a quarterback competition and all this stuff. And I get 1 year things change, but it's like you had the guy there. He beat out your former first-round pick of Trey Lance. You traded him away because Darnold was so good and because Brock was amazing. And then when Darnold was in the building, Brock still outplayed him. So it's not as if Brock already hasn't beat that beast before. And I completely believe that he'll do it again.
What do you make of this comment that Brock Purdy is successful because of his all-star cast?
Bobo. I love you, but what? I love you, Bobo. And I think there is credence to the idea of a healthy roster,
What's
having all
wrong with
these start
having good players around you? When
right.
is that a penalty to any other quarterback but Brock Purdy? I don't understand it.
Well, look at Sam Darnold, Justin Jefferson.
Right.
He had Aaron
It's a good
Jones. He had
offensive
Jordan
line.
Addison. Like the Vikings offensive line wasn't just good. When their all-pro left tackle, Christian Darrisaw, went down, they wouldn't have got another starting left tackle in Cam Robinson, and he played the rest of the year for them. It's like, so I don't think, like, sure, you can point to Jimmy Garoppolo and say, well, look at him now. And yeah, I'd agree with you, Bobo. Completely agree. Jimmy Garoppolo, for the betterment of his career in San Francisco, was otherwise carried by this roster. Awesome. Brock Purdy, if you watch the games, which Bobo, I know you do, has completely taken this team to a different height. But the way he plays, the throws he makes, like everything, the way he plays is different than Jimmy Garoppolo, who you saw last Sunday or yesterday, looks like Jimmy G, throwing bad picks, inaccurate, and can't throw outside the numbers. So, like, you cannot make that comparison. They are completely different players doing completely different things with this Niners offense.
Because when he came down to it, depending on Brock, delivered a 6-11 season. What about last season? Is that because he had all the Avengers with him, so therefore it didn't count? Go ahead. I just think it's not all on Brock this season. We had a comically bad defense this year and special teams to go along with. Yeah, Brock had a down year, but a lot of people had a down year this year. But go ahead.
I think that two things can be true. That Brock Purdy, for the first 7 to 8 weeks this season, carried the offense. No Christian McCaffrey. You had Jordan Mason, then he got hurt in Seattle. Deebo Samuel was nowhere to be found outside of the last 2 weeks of the season, 3 weeks of the season. George Kittle was there. It was essentially Brock and George Kittle, and for like 6 weeks, Jordan Mason. And
they sent a little Juwan Jennings there too.
Right. Sorry, and Juwan. Can't forget about Benny Jennings out there, lined out wide. But you know, it was basically Kittle and Brock and Juwan, and that can get you so far. And in that same breath, you can also admit that Brock against the Dolphins, against the Cardinals, against the Chiefs, and against the Lions late in that game didn't play great.
Nope. No, I agree.
But that's okay to say. Like, Brock has to be better in 2-minute drills late. Like, when I talk about the defense doing their job and the offense not picking up the pieces, I point to the Lions game, the Dolphins game and the Cardinals game. You have a chance to drive down that field and win the football game with 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes left, and boom, interceptions. That has to get cleaned up. But I'm not putting a 6-11 season on Brock Purdy, knowing there were so many plug-and-play people out there. Jake Moody's missing field goals. Special teams can't do a damn thing right. Like, so many things outside of Brock Purdy went wrong. For me to say, well, Brock can't lead the team.
Why is it it's all on Brock when the Niners lose?
Because it's quarterback. It's the quarterback thing.
But there's so many other pieces to this team that to say it's just one guy, I think is short-sighted.
People are expecting Brock Purdy to play like Joe Burrow when he's not.
But he's not.
Exactly.
There's 4 teams in the league that have elite quarterbacks. There's 28 other teams that are searching and will always be searching for that guy. And the 49ers, unfortunately, are in the group that don't have that guy. You can't tear your team to pieces every single year because you don't have that guy. What you have to do is say, okay, he's pretty good. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the amount of talent around him to make up for the difference. Josh Allen is he is the Bills.
Yeah.
You take him out of that lineup, they don't sniff the playoffs. He's that important. Lamar Jackson, amazing talent. He is that Ravens team. People like those guys are the 49ers had 2 elite quarterbacks in their history. They may never have one again. I am not going to punish someone for having talent around him. There was a stat that they put out that said, and it might have been Larry Krueger that put it out there, that the Niners Brock was okay. So I think it was like 41 touchdowns were scored last year between, I think, Debo, Christian McCaffrey, and Brandon Ayuk. And all those players at some point in time during the season were not on the field. So you lost over 40 touchdowns worth of points this past
Yeah.
season. If it's yes, he played bad late in some of these games to end the season. Totally agree. I was pissed, but I'm not going to sit there and put the whole thing on Brock. To me, that's you're watching football and you're looking for someone to blame. And to me, the Niners right now, I think they suffer from a little bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's part of who they are, how they draft, what they are as an organization. That's some of the struggles that happen. It wasn't just Brock. Offensive line is never something they prioritize. It's always playmakers first, offensive line maybe third. They might edge, and defensive line might come second, right? And then offensive line is somewhere in the middle. Philosophically, the Niners have some things that need to change in order to get better. And one of those things is putting a really good offensive line in front of Brock or Dobbs or whoever's playing quarterback. But I get mad when people put it all on Brock and say, well, they're going to punish him for not having those guys. Like, who was complaining last year when we were winning? Like, are you serious? I didn't care, and I still don't care. That's just me.
And you look at it, there are only 3 games that this team probably would have won had Brock been elite all year compared to the games that so the Cardinals game early could have won that one for sure. Okay. They lost by 1 point, whatever it was. Okay. Then the Dolphins game, sure. So you're 8-9. You still miss the playoffs. Okay. So you have to find one other game, maybe 2. So maybe the Rams game, 12-6. Fine. Brock was phenomenal against the Rams early in the year. Even if you're 9-8, you probably don't make the playoffs still in the NFC West. Now, maybe you don't, but it's like Brock to me him being like perfect would have only been the difference in about 2 or 3 games this year. And like you can point to, well, if Jake Moody doesn't miss a kick in Los Angeles early in the year, okay, if Jordan Mason doesn't fumble in the goal line against the Cardinals in that game, maybe they win both those games. And we aren't even having a conversation about, well, what if Aaron Banks doesn't get hurt? And Trent Williams doesn't get hurt? And Ayuk doesn't get hurt? And seems he's healthy for the majority of the year or comes back and stays healthy the rest of the year? Like, you can point to every other team. Take away T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Take away Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs from Jared Goff. What is he? Probably not very good. And I like Jared Goff, having a great year. Lions are having a phenomenal season. Good for them. But it's to say that take away Justin Jefferson from Sam Darnold. No quarterback is the same when you don't have your weapons around them.
There's only really 2 if you think about it. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. They can kill you with their legs consistently.
Yeah.
How many quarterbacks can do that in this league?
Like,
not many.
Even Mahomes struggled this year without his receivers. And even now, while their offense is picking things up because Kelsey's getting more involved and they're getting healthy, like they had to go get DeAndre Hopkins to help them. And even Hopkins, for as good as he is, he's not going to be this game-changing player. Their offense still is having a hard time putting up 30 points.
Mahomes has been a game manager this year to me.
Yes, the defense has saved them.
Their defense is amazing. And they have a really good offensive line, too. They did a really good job, a team winning championships, and yet they're still addressing their offensive line. That's when I say it's a philosophical issue with the 49ers and even a team like the Dolphins who kind of seems like they run the way they draft kind of similar, where they put playmakers in front of offensive linemen for some reason. I don't understand that. To me, it makes zero sense.
We'll take it a step further, and this kind of harkens back to the whole Sam Darnold conversation and what Brian Baldinger said. I know that Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan and Zach Taylor and Kevin O'Connell all run this Shanahan scheme. Mike McDaniel, they all run this Shanahan scheme. But if you look at what McVay does and Kevin O'Connell do compared to what Shanahan does and McDaniel do, McDaniel and Shanahan can run and call a heck of a running game, whereas McVay and O'Connell, they'll eat you up in the passing game. They have different strengths as coordinators and play callers. You put Brock in Minnesota and you flip things around and put Darnold here this year in San Francisco. Now, maybe there are certain throws Brock can't make that Darnold can, but I guarantee you they're in the playoffs. They're having equally or close to the same amount of success they're having right now this year. Whereas Darnold, this team is probably still 6-11 with him playing quarterback. Like, you look at like people forget that they can hate Kyle for what he does as a play caller and stuff. He's not a pass game coordinator, never has been really.
No.
And so I'm not gonna say, well, Brock didn't overcome Shanahan not being able to be a good pass game coordinator in the fourth quarter. That's not fair.
The Niners are not. The Niners to me are a front running team though. They play better with the lead because they can run the ball. Kyle doesn't. The Niners and the Dolphins both have an issue with a drop back passing game. They can't win it. They can't win with it. Like if
never have been able to.
Niners can't do it. They couldn't do it with Jimmy Garoppolo either. If the Niners are behind in a game and they have to depend on throwing the ball to win a game, eight out of 10 times they lose that game. The Niners are the type of team they can score on you early, and then they just run the ball down your throat, and then the defense gets some takeaways. That's been their method of operation, their MO for a long time. And this year, the Niners were in positions where the run game wasn't doing that well, and they had to come back. And unfortunately, Brock and even Jimmy Garoppolo at times have not been able to figure out a way to bring this team back from behind because Kyle, just like the Dolphins with Tua, they struggle in that drop back passing game. It just everybody else in the league can do it. It seems like the Niners and Dolphins have this. I don't know what the problem is where they can't run a drop back passing game, to win a game, or if the run game's not working. It really that their game plan is based on things going perfect a lot of times. Kyle has a big issue sometimes when like Chris McCaffrey goes out or someone goes out because he'll build his game plan around like one or two guys. Whereas some coordinators seem to figure out a way to get the ball moving even when big time playmakers are out. But I don't know, man. I'm not going to sit here and poop on Brock for having a down year when everybody else had a down year and to say that, it's only because of the Avengers and this, that, and the other. It's just a tired narrative. Is there truth to it? Yes, but
sure.
There's 28 teams in the league that don't have elite quarterbacks that are searching every single season or just doing the best they can to build a team around it.
The best passing quarterback Shanahan had, Matt Ryan, he won the MVP. Same result of the last 2 Super Bowls he's been in. Like, just the way things are, Shanahan does not call a great passing game. He never has. And I would agree with you, Bobo, and I hope you're still in here, because I would completely agree with you if Brock was having a bad year, but everybody else was healthy, and you couldn't make an excuse for him. If he was having a bad year, and again, there are still things he can get better at and needs to improve upon if they want to go win a Super Bowl. But had CMC been healthy, had Ayuk been there from day one, had Williams been healthy all year, like had this team been like, if it was last year's team all over again and everyone's fully healthy, doing their thing, feeling good and out there, dancing around, whatnot, like if Brock was bad and was dragging the team down, I would say, well, look at this. This is a problem. Yep. That's why they wanted to replace Jimmy Garoppolo. You can clearly see, for as good as he was in San Francisco, there was a limit to what he can do. And at times, he was dragging the offense down. That was not Brock this year. I did not think once, well, Brock's the problem. He's dragging the team down. It was like, okay, well, like, that wasn't a great throw. Can't make that throw against the Rams. Well, he throws a pick to Jawan Jennings late in the game. Don't do that. But it's like, everything else is like, well, it's crumbling around him like the walls of Jericho, and he's trying to pick it back up by himself. It has a little bit of help along the way, but it wasn't enough.
It's a good Bible reference there. Well, walls of Jericho. That's pretty good.
That's
nice.
That's the 12 years of private Christian school coming in handy.
And there was only one building that survived. Brock made Jawan a 1,000-ish yard receiver. I think I just, like you said, everybody had a down year. There was a lot of things going wrong with this team. Tragedy. Well, I mean, we could talk about that now if you want. Just the tragedy. You mix in Ricky Pearsall getting shot and holdouts in the offseason, all that stuff. It was just a disastrous year on all fronts. I'm not going to say I'm not going to allow. I hate when people put it and pin it on Brock Purdy. and say you can't pay him this year for the type of year that the 49ers have when you're losing over 40 touchdowns out of 3 players who either all the 2 of them, let's see, Ayuk missed what? He got lost in October, I think, right? Christian
Yeah, like
McCaffrey
week
we had
6 or 7,
for yeah,
3 games,
we had
2
Christian
games.
McCaffrey for like a game and a half.
Yeah,
And Debo is really bad this year for who knows what reason. I don't know if to me Debo is one of those players that, they have a short shelf life because of how he plays.
yeah,
Same thing with Christian McCaffrey. They'll give you everything they have and they'll beat their ass into the ground and then you just like, okay, who's this guy now? Like I am fearful with Christian McCaffrey that we may have seen the best of him. I hope I'm wrong, but that is definitely, that had a lot to do with things this year too. It wasn't just that Brock was making late game mistakes and throwing interceptions because he did that. But like you said, there was so much other stuff going on that used the lazy narrative that it was just Brock. I had somebody responded to something on Twitter and they said, or no, it was on Facebook. It said the 49ers doing bad this year and they lost that game because of Brock Purdy and Brock Purdy only. No other reason. And people in the comments are like, did you just watch the same game? Like Moody missed 3 kicks, 2 field goals, and an extra point. What are you talking about? Yeah,
yeah.
he threw picks to end the game, but like your kicker kicks those 3 field goals. That's 7 points to win a game. To me, it's lazy. It's lazy.
And it's tough too. Like you talk about the tragedies this team faced this year. Like we had 2 players lose children.
Yes.
Like their mind was not on playing football. One of
And
them, Williams, didn't come back.
I don't blame him.
No,
I don't blame him.
Like
when I lost my dad, I couldn't work for months. I was distraught. Some people can go right back to work and do that they have to do and they're able to compartmentalize. I couldn't. I was personally affected for a long time until I could get my crap together. So I have no place to say there was an insensitive tweet. I know you know what I'm talking about. There was an insensitive tweet that was made during the season. And it's just like come on, guys, be better, like separate football from who cares about football. Oh, he was having a down year previous. So what? Like, don't bring it up. Like he lost a child. One was a stillbirth and one was a year old. And to me, they're both just as bad. You can't say like one is worse than the other. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, and then you hear Charvarius Ward today talking about like having PTSD from even being in California. Like his wife won't even travel to the state.
Yeah.
Like that is, and again, like I've never felt that way before. Like I've lost grandparents and whatnot. But like to have that emotion, like I don't know when's the last time Charvarius Ward's seen his partner or his wife, whatever she may be. Like I don't think she's coming to home games.
No,
like
I wouldn't blame her.
He said he was sleeping by himself at night, throwing up and waking up in like sweats. Like he's going through something far beyond football. Have a bad year. I don't care, brother. Just make sure you're mentally okay.
Yeah.
And thankfully they had a baby and whatnot, but it's like still.
To me, like, especially for the woman too, to lose a child, whether again be stillbirth or to lose it, for a parent to lose a child, especially the woman who birthed that child.
Yeah.
I don't blame her whatsoever. If she just wants him to quit football, never look back and go live somewhere in another state like Montana or Utah, just go live up in the mountains or something and leave civilization behind. I don't blame him whatsoever. Football wise, they were probably going to move on from him anyways.
That's true. Yes.
Renardo Green made that abundantly clear this year.
He looks good.
I want to talk. I don't know how much more time you have, so I don't want to keep you
all night, Aaron.
I want to go into, before we talk about this coming draft and free agency, I wanted to talk about this past draft.
Okay.
We kicked ass in this past
we did.
draft. This is one of the better drafts. Pooney, Garendo, Mustafa, Renardo Green, and I'm trying to think of another player. Who else?
Garendo was in there.
That's 4 players.
Pearsall was still there.
And Pearsall, okay, so that's 5. Pearsall shined at the end of the season. I think Pearsall is he's gonna be good.
He's gonna be good. He's gonna be good next year.
That's 5, dude. That's 5 draft picks in one draft.
Yeah.
most teams are cool if they get like 3. We got 5.
Yeah.
I mean, just take me through like I mean, Garendo, he had a little bit of the offensive line didn't do him any favors. I thought they played pretty bad towards the end of the season. But he can catch the ball, which is awesome
Yeah, he
for
can.
a bigger back. But man, Dominic Pooney, I know he had some penalties yesterday, and he was he maybe hit a rookie wall this year, but I mean, unbelievable. I don't know who was your favorite out of all the guys that were drafted. Mine, I think, was Renardo Green. On top of it
Ooh.
all,
I think that would be the default. I think I told you this after the draft. Like I had 2 guys I fell in love with, and that was Pearsall and Garendo before the draft. And so it's hard for me not to pick them because I those are my guys coming into the draft this past year. But um, I think Green and Mustafa just they didn't blow me away. But to be fair and to be clear, like I knew who Mustafa was, and the expectations were high. Like I believed he was going to be this team's best safety this year, and he probably was when everything was taken into account. But Green, I had no idea who he was. Like when they picked him, I was like, "Who?" And then you see
right?
what he does. Like you see what he does this year. He's phenomenal. Like he makes losing Travarius Ward this offseason look easy. It's like, yep, see ya. And Mooney was an All Pro last year or a Pro Bowler last year. Like he was phenomenal. And so it's really hard for me not to point to Green and Mustafa as just two like these lockdown thumping cornerback and safety duo they got in the
And then you
second
had
and fourth
Demo in the
rounds this
same
year.
secondary, who's amazing.
Yeah. And then like you hope you can maybe add in somebody else and maybe it's a veteran next year, whoever it is, like you just like if we can get one plug and play guy next year in that secondary, whether it is on the outside or playing nickel or playing safety, whatever it is, this secondary could be one of the best in football next year.
Yes,
That's the
yes.
upside they have with Green, Mustafa, and Lenore kind of leading the charge.
That was the depressing part about the defensive line being so bad this year is
Yeah.
you had this really good young secondary locking teams down, and just there's no pass rush. I don't care who you are. I mean, another reason was too is that they had Yiadom on the field at certain he would like they didn't even try to throw to anybody else. It was just like, where's
Yeah.
22? There it is. There it is. Like, yeah, I mean, wow, Demo, he's so good.
So good.
Renardo Green wasn't perfect this year. He gave up some catches here and there and maybe, looked like a rookie at times, but he played really well. You never looked at him and said, wow, he's overmatched.
Exactly.
And then Mustafa, the problem with the Niners is they have a lot of similar guys at safety.
Yeah.
Mustafa, Bunga, Jair Brown, they're all box safeties. They need to get themselves to complete the secondary. They need a free safety. They need a guy who can roam play center field. That's their biggest. That and another nickel. I mean, those are their 2 things. But yeah, what an amazing draft class. Pooney was a godsend because our offensive line has been so bad this year, and he
Yeah.
was like
So
the one constant.
had Pooney not say they didn't draft him, it would have been Williams, Banks, Brendel, probably Burford, and McKivitz. And I like Burford. He was fine this year as a bench player. Like I'm interested to see him play left guard next year if he does get a shot. But just imagine a Dominic Pooney who was like hadn't allowed a sack for like 16 weeks this year. Like I don't know how you look at him and say he isn't like an all rookie team, first team member. He was
Right.
so good all year. And for a guy you weren't sure if he'd play tackle or guard, like he was a plug and play. Like he got that job via injury to Feliciano and Burford in training camp and never looked back. Like he was head and shoulders this team's best offensive lineman the entire year. And that includes Trent Williams. That's crazy.
Niners offensive line wise were about as bad as they could be other than him. But I look at this guy like Ben Barch, and like you
Yeah.
said, maybe a guy like Burford. They probably won't draft a left guard, so that would kind of take care of that. Center and right tackle are they? I mean, they're big. They have big needs in the draft, but like you said, going into the draft, like who are you going to draft first? You drafting an offensive line tackle first, or you drafting an edge guy? If I'm the Niners, just based on history, they're going edge. They're going edge, or a pat. Because in my fantasy is to bring back DeForest Buckner at defensive tackle this offseason. for like a
Okay.
1-year deal, right?
Okay.
So bring the band back together, bring him back, get another edge, find your D Ford replacement in this year's draft, and let's see if we can like recreate 2019 all over again. But yeah, this is a fantastic draft. The Niners have had some big misses over the years, and I think somebody made a good point. As bad as the season was this year, this draft made it just a little bit more tolerable, considering how they tend to do in drafts where you know they can be kind of just some of them are pretty bad recently, other than like maybe a couple players towards the end, but 5 players coming out of one draft that all got significant playing time this year and played relatively well. That's pretty amazing.
And you're hoping next year, if Debo Samuel's gone, or even if he comes back and Ayuk is out for what seems like to be some portion of next year, maybe you get to see more of Jacob Cowing next year.
Why
Like
not?
he has 4.3 speed. Use it. Like, please use it. It's the difference in games. You watch what Andy Reid does. He will make Mecole Hardman look like a viable receiver option when he's not, because he utilizes that speed. I want to see Cowing on end arounds and reverses and all that
Yes.
stuff. Like, it just, you have an element on the offense that you're not using, that we did see to a certain degree when they had Grendel playing running back and receiver. His speed plays. Cowing's speed plays, not just on punt returns and kick returns. He can be a good receiver for you. But I will say this, that in regards to 11th overall pick, I think a lot of what they do at 11 is going to be determined as to what they do with Javon Hargrave. Because if they bring him back, I don't think in their mind they're like, well, we have to go, get another defensive tackle in the first round. Yeah, you should certainly bring some more guys in, the more run defending kind of run stuff, or some mean, vicious, just balls of just
A big fat guy. You just need a big fat guy who weighs
right.
380.
You need your Mike Purcells, you need your Isaac Sopowagas, just fill the hole. All
Give me a
you
Ted
gotta do is
Washington from like 25 years ago,
exactly. Give me Cam Hayward in Pittsburgh, guy that can just fill the hole for me. But I also don't believe they are out on Colton McKivitz. Like, I know fans are, and maybe you are. I don't believe McKivitz. If McKivitz is your worst offensive lineman, that's a good offensive line.
Okay.
I think, I don't know what they do with Jake Brendel this offseason. I think he's absolutely terrible. He was god awful this year. Like, I think he ranked, in regards of all of centers in football that played one snap, the 52nd ranked pass blocking grade via PFF, which if you don't like PFF, fine, but like, just god awful this year. Terrible. Protections were sliding the wrong way. His back was turned watching his quarterback or his running back get hit, just not knowing what he was doing. That said, I don't think San Francisco is drafting a center. I don't think they
make a
want to
free
draft
agent.
one.
I don't think they do either. I think free agency is, I have a feeling, I said this with somebody else. I said, if they're going to make a move, they're going a free agent center route. They're not drafting a center to be a starting center on this line. There's no way. Now with the quarterback who you're about to pay a ton of money to. Somebody made a good point about in Atlanta. I think it's Atlanta. Chris Dahlman, who used to play here. I think he was an offensive lineman. His son plays
there,
center
right?
in Atlanta. Somebody just brought that up randomly. I'm like, hey, whatever. The more the merrier, bring his son into the fold like his dad was here. But I mean, I'm like you. There's no way they draft center. I really think if they could have gotten themselves into the top 10 this year, I really would have been awesome if they traded out, picked up another first round pick in the first round.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe double dipped, maybe went in and got an edge guy in the team, or in the top 10 or top 12, and then come back into the top back end of like maybe say like pick 24 or something, and come back and draft an offensive tackle. It's is what they need to do as opposed to what we want them to do, or maybe kind of the same, but it's not sexy to draft offensive linemen. Like,
Yeah.
with the 11th pick in the 2025 NFL draft, the 49ers select, and you put an offensive tackle there, it's a pretty boring pick. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Even though it's a
Yeah.
necessity. But just go ahead. I was going to say, based on history, I think they go edge, but that's just me.
Yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to see what their mindset is this offseason, because in previous years, it wasn't like they had these like clear cut, like that's a detriment, that's a hole you have to fix. Whereas this year, it's like, holy hell, like there are clear issues on this offensive line. How do you not adjust and go get somebody else? I do think that you look at who they just signed and Matt Hennessy to a 2-year deal, who was a center in Atlanta, took Alex Mack's spot, and kind of was his replacement for Atlanta. They just signed him to a 2-year deal. That to me is interesting. I don't think that is the answer, or at least we'll see him training camp next year. But I do think it gives them a starting caliber center if he's healthy that may be able to kind of, I guess, be a starter there. Who knows? But to me, like it's moves like that where you're like, well, that's a weird move to make. You signed him during the year on a 2-year deal. Brendel's a vet, Hennessy's a vet. I also believe that they want Barch and Burford and maybe a draft pick. I mean, maybe they also bring back Feliciano for a year if he wants to come back and finish that 1 year he didn't get to play this year. I think they want to see Zakel play center this next year. I don't love him, but I do think they're like, this draft pick is either going to pay off or get cut next year because they scouted him for like 4 years at Fordham and took him forever to figure it out. And like they had been looking at him for years. And Chris Forrester, the offensive line coach, was like, yep, love him, get him. Okay, well, Brendel sucks. Is he the answer? I'm not sure, but all the moves they're making and who they currently have on the offensive line lends me to believe if they draft an offensive lineman, it'll probably be another guard to replace Aaron Banks compared to being a center to replace Jake Brendel.
Free agency wise, if you had to make any type of guess where they could to address this team, you think they're more of the re-sign and restructure than be active in free agency? Or do you think they make a couple of B-level moves? Like I said, maybe a center if they don't think Hennessy's a guy, or maybe go safety. I just to me it's they don't have like they're not going to. I don't think they're going to go spending in free agency. They're not going to be big spenders, is what I said or what I mean.
I think their first kind of move they should make is extending George Kittle and free up some money. He's a massive cap hit next year. He's only 31 years old going into his 32-year season. He looks phenomenal this year. He's going to be an all-pro. He was probably the best tight end at all in football. He's better than Kelsey, better than everybody else out there. I would extend him.
He wants to be here too.
Right. And like, so free up some money, go extend Juszczyk for 1 to 2 more years. Like he was still a fine fullback. This offense needs a fullback. He's the best one probably still playing today, if not for Ricard or I think the guy in Miami is called Singleton or something like that. Maybe I'm wrong there. But I also believe this team, they're going to try to re-sign Greenlaw. I think they're going to try to re-sign Hufanga, although I do think it would behoove them to let Hufanga test the market. I think despite Hufanga giving your defense a big push later in the year, he missed so many tackles.
So bad.
Like not a great in coverage. And I get it. He had the ACL injury and he had the wrist injury. So maybe a year removed from both those things, he'll get better and back to who he was a couple of years ago. But I am perfectly fine with riding with Mustafa. You have Jair Brown back there, who I think will be better next season. And then you hopefully figure things out. Yes, Ingle is his name. Sorry, the fullback in Miami. That said, I think fixing the defensive line, like go get your run stuffer in free agency. Don't wait for the draft. Like those guys, and like they can work out, but they'll take some time. Their bodies usually aren't right just yet. Like I'm looking at one guy, and maybe it's me being a homer. You want DeForest Buckner back. I want DJ Jones back. He's younger. He'll be cheaper. And you just plug him right in. You can cut Malik Collins and call it a day. Then go, bang. There you go. I would love that.
Yeah, free safety for me is my biggest concern. Just because I feel like the secondary could be all but complete if they were to find one.
Sure.
And like I keep saying, center is a concern of mine. Just because, you're paying Brock a lot of money and you want to have somebody back there that knows not only what they're doing, but is, able to help call games along with Brock. I think that's always good. Like, Brendel was so bad this year. It was
so bad,
comical at best watching games. Like you said, facing the wrong way, facing the quarterback. on passing, or not even, or the running back on, you see clips on television and the guy's looking into the backfield. It's like something you see in Madden where you're like, why is the offensive lineman turned the wrong way? And and never mind,
Because
it's a
Jake
glitch.
Brendel's playing center for you.
Like, no, that actually happens on the 49ers. That's not a Madden thing. Jeez. But yeah, there's that. I get excited for free agency, but I like you said, I'm more of a mindset of I think the Niners are going to do a lot of in-house work. Kittle wants to be here. There's no way in hell the Niners ever let him go. There's just no way. There's death, taxes, and there's George Kittle as a 49er. That would never happen. Maybe the old regime would screw something like that up and let him go back in the day, during
With
the
Trent
Tom
Baalke and
Sula.
company out there in Jacksonville?
Yeah. He was somehow keeping his job. And he's gone through like 7 head coaches in the last like 7, 8
Dude,
years.
I don't get it at all.
How he keeps his job is beyond me. Let me ask you a real quick question. Like, do you think Trevor Lawrence is what people thought he was going to be being drafted, or do you think he's been a massive bust or a massive letdown? Let me not go bust route.
Yeah, I don't think he's been a bust, but like when he was coming out of Clemson, and I don't know how old he is now, but that was like 6 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever it was. The talk was he's the best college prospect since Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning.
Yes.
And I get it. Peyton Manning had a really bad rookie season, but then became a Hall of Famer and one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Andrew Luck was Mr. Consistent almost his entire career, had it not been for a terrible offensive line in front of him. And I think had he finished his career, it'd probably be one of the greatest quarterbacks ever as well. Like he'd be in that Drew Brees conversation, I believe. Maybe that's crazy to say, but I think that's true. Or more in that Phillip Rivers conversation. But I think that for Trevor Lawrence, I'm not willing to give up on him just yet. I think they have surrounded him with a pretty terrible supporting cast outside of that 1 year when he had Christian Kirk and he had, some other guys around him, and Travis Etienne. It just really hasn't clicked for him, but also the coaching's been terrible. That defense is terrible. Like they had Brian Thomas. That's a great start. Maybe you get Christian Kirk back off the injury next year. That's a great start. You have Tanks Bigsby. You have Etienne. Etienne hasn't been great, but it's like you have some pieces now, but you got to get an offensive line. You got to get that defense in order because it's been a nightmare. And now, like if I ask you this, there's the Bears, there's the Patriots, the Jets, the Saints, and then there's the Jaguars. Like, which one of those do you think is like the best fit for a new head coach? I don't think it's Jacksonville by any means.
Jets? No,
Right.
I can't even say that because they have a quarterback issue if Aaron Rodgers doesn't come back. But I don't know.
But they have Breece Hall and Gabe Wilson, and they have Devontae Adams, and they can trade him. Like at least there's hope that a new regime in New York can figure something out. The Pats have Drake May, who looks phenomenal this year. They just need weapons. And then you have the Saints, who are on cap hell and will always be there because they're going to pay Derek Carr and Alvin Kamara till the day they die. But then it's like, oh, the Jaguars are here, and it's like, well, do I want to work with Trent Baalke? Like, I'm going to get fired in 2 years, and he'll somehow keep his job.
He'll still keep his exactly.
And draft 13 guys that have torn ACLs.
And he sounds like Clown Shoes. Freaking that one guy. Forget his name. Forget the television show, but there's a. I don't know, but he just has that voice. I forgot the. It was a guy that used to do like daring jumps or whatever. He was like a
I know it was like Evel Knievel.
Some sort of Evel Knievel wannabe, and he had a similar voice to the guy Trent Baalke. I forget the name of the actual actor. There's an actor that has his name that if you or had his voice, if you heard it, you'd laugh your ass off because it's literally Trent Baalke. With that, that kind of voice. So yeah, he's Super Dave. Yes.
Who was that? Who was
Super Dave Osborne? It was some guy in the 90s. I don't know if he was he wasn't like an actual like stunt driver guy that would jump over the, like the fountain in Las Vegas, whatever they call it, the name of that place. But like, yeah, Super Dave Osborne. Yeah. That
Okay.
that just aged me about 35 years, but
Yeah, it ran from 1987 to 1991.
okay. So that he has a similar voice. So Super
That's
Dave
5
Osborne.
years before me.
Yeah, I was born in 79, so I had a little bit of a head start on you. But yeah. I guess really the last thing and we can get out of here is just fourth place schedule. Um high pick in the draft. And they're returning a lot of talent still. I think this team is still one of the most talented teams in the league. Um, Based off of all of that, I think the Niners could come back next year and have a 13 win season easily.
Woo! That's a hot
Um,
take.
I'm scared because I say that, but they just like you said, they got to go all in this year. They really got to make some not daring moves, but like they really got to be. This was a bad year. This is a bad look for John and Kyle. They got a vote of confidence from Jed York. So they're coming back, but there's a lot of good players on this team, and they still did really bad this year. And this is a mark on them. I forgot who said it. He said our names are attached to this season. So I think with health, with a good draft on top of this year's draft, and free agency, and just guys coming back, I think this team. I mean, other than the Rams, I mean, the West is going to be kind of the same as it was last year. As long as the Seahawks have Geno Smith at quarterback, I don't see him as a viable threat. And the Cardinals, whatever. I don't know. They're the Cardinals. I don't fear the Cardinals. It's to me, it's really the Rams. As long as
Yeah.
they have McVay and they have Stafford, they're always going to be dangerous. So I don't know. That's just my mindset going. I think this year, hopefully, was an anomaly and was an outlier because of everything that happened. And we're talking about tragedy. We're talking about a player getting shot. We're talking about injuries, losing a Super Bowl, holdouts, all that stuff. I think the Niners come into this season in next season and have a chance. And I'm usually, like I said, I'm usually a half empty guy. I'm usually pretty negative, but I've said this before. I think they have a chance to right a lot of wrongs, and having a fourth place schedule next year kind of helps that a little bit.
I I think there'll be one word you hear quite often this offseason leading up to the regular season, and that is refocused. I think this team will be refocused, re-energized, whatever word you want to put in there. I think this
Real
team
off season too. They actually get some time off for a change.
you get to rest, you get to recuperate, you get to get healthy. They're going to walk into next year essentially only having one guy banged up, and that is Brandon Ayuk. And who knows what he becomes in the future? Maybe, a lot up in the air with him, but the way Pearsall played to end the year gave me a lot of hope for what he can be. I thought the way Purdy played against the Lions with Pearsall involved, that's what you would have seen all year had Ayuk been up to speed the entire time. I firmly believe that.
Me too.
And that game alone gave me hope of like, oh, okay, so this team with a number one receiver that can get open and beat man coverage can actually still be a viable passing offense with Purdy at the helm. But I think it'll be a refocused team this offseason. They'll get healthy. I think sometimes, like when you go through what's been a rather traumatic season for them on and off the field, just getting away and like just recuperating and just getting away from the noise, like taking 2 months off, 3 months off, and just working out by yourself, not focusing on the NFL per se or, game plans and having to get ready and up for Sundays and Mondays and Thursdays. Like you're just kind of there with your family, with your loved ones, with your kids, and you just clear your mind. It'll do
Yeah.
so much for this team next year. And who knows what happens in 2025, but at least from the offset, from the outlook, it looks pretty good. If they can nail this draft and get a couple key free agents involved and just get healthy and revitalized, I see no reason as to why the San Francisco 49ers couldn't win the division next year in 2025.
I'm on board with everything you said, man. It, they, a lot of people will say, well, the Chiefs are going through the same thing and they're doing just fine. Well, winning and can cure a lot of problems.
Yep.
But the Niners have, I mean, a bunch of long seasons, tragedy, injuries. They played into February last year, and the free agency began in March, and it was just like, and before you know it, OTAs are in May, and it's just like, wow, where did the offseason go? They literally have an extra month to be rested. Like they have the whole month of January still to do absolutely nothing but recuperate and get away. especially for guys that have lost children. And, coming in next year, hopefully he's a lot healthier than he was in training camp with Ricky Parasol. I remember when the quote was he was in the hospital. He was telling like John Lynch, like, I'm not injury prone. I think that was the quote that he said, even though he's just gotten shot. Like that was what he was worried about. So
I love him.
I'm
love it
looking,
so
I'm
much.
looking to him to be, I'm looking for him to be a special player. He looks good in spurts. It's just, he's got to be, have another full off season, get a little bigger, get a little stronger. Hopefully no tragedy strikes again for anybody on this team. And, like you said, I mean, coming back and winning the division next year is a definite doable thing, especially with that schedule. That would be a massive and fireable offense if they don't get at least a 1 or 2 seed coming out of that season next year, even if they have to play an extra playoff game. If you're scraping by next year, then you can start to talk about like, okay, we need to make some serious changes here. So hopefully that's not the case. But I'm ready to have like I'm like the players. This has been such a bad year. I'm ready to have like no football talk for a while. Like I hopefully I'll be talking to Shasky. He might come on the show, and then there'll be a whole lot of nada for me until probably free agency.
Wow.
I'm taking because there's nothing to do.
Sabbatical.
I'm taking a little bit of sabbatical. I don't make money off this thing. The views are down all across YouTube unless you have a, some sort of father in the industry or you're just a well-known like, I don't know, TV guy or something. That's pretty much the only way you make it. It's either, I don't know. I don't know anybody. I'm just a normal guy. So, but yeah, I'm looking to take a break from it just like the players, and then hopefully, free agency will get the juices flowing in the draft. I know you'll be excited. We haven't had to worry about the draft because you've been so good. Like when you're good, you pick so late that it's like, I was telling somebody, I said, when the Niners, it's cool that they picked early and we're getting guys like Bosa and this player, but that also means you suck and you're not a good team. So I'd rather pick at the end of the draft and get, a player here, a player there that, might start, might not, but you're winning all the time. So and there's the pros and cons. Yeah, we'll have a nice high draft pick this year, but I'd rather not be picking at 11 for a long time. I'd rather be winning in February and hopefully a Lombardi is in our future next year. We'll see.
It honestly just sounds like you're trying to avoid the whole Kirk Cousins conversation.
I don't want to talk about Kirk Cousins. Why would you want to bring him here?
That is courtesy of Niners media.
Niners.
Oh man, he's avoiding the Kirk Cousins conversation.
What do you think about it? Would you be open to the 49ers bringing him here?
Yeah, if he's a backup with like
as a backup, because some people are like Brock doesn't have a backup to push him. He needs a backup. I think it was Larry Kruger that said that.
You got to push your starting quarterback.
Yeah, and he needs someone to push the starter. I don't know. Apparently, that's what Kruger said.
Like
Kruger's
if you're paying your quarterback $65 million, no one's going to push him.
Well, because they have Dobbs, they have guys that don't threaten the starter. I'm like, why would you want your starter threatened? No, you're not paying a guy to be. Yeah, it's crazy.
Does Carson Wentz threaten Patrick Mahomes?
No.
Did Brandon Allen threaten Joe Burrow? Does Mitchell Trubisky threaten Josh Allen?
No. I thought Dobbs was a perfectly capable backup. You can't have it all. People live in this world where they think you could just sign everybody. There is a thing called the salary cap. I know a lot of us don't think it's real, but it actually is. You can't just. Who are they going to bring in? Like I don't know. The only guy in the past that I loved as a backup who became a really good backup from team to team was Fitzpatrick back in the day. Ryan
Gunslinger.
Oh, I loved him. He was either really good or really bad, but sometimes he was really good. And so I don't know.
Would you be opposed to Justin Fields being the backup next year? Because I would love that.
I don't know.
That's high upside. Reclamation project.
Got a big arm.
Run really well. Yeah, I mean, hey.
Why not? But somebody just brought up Tanner Mordecai, so I don't know. The Kirk Cousins things, I think, may have sailed, but then with Kyle Shanahan, Sterling, you never know, right?
It's never over.
It's never over with him.
Never over.
And we have the Aaron Rodgers. What about Aaron Rodgers? Somebody was like, "Yeah, trade Purdy, bring in Rodgers." I mean, it's just like,
I
oh my god, here we
I
go
think
again.
Shasky this morning said that he'd be more open than ever to signing Aaron Rodgers. So you have to ask him about that whenever he's on.
Yo, okay, I definitely have to talk to him because he made a cool video yesterday, just being like, man, just an embarrassment of a season. I was right there with him. It was tough. It was a tough one. This was a tough season for fans, and I think it was a tough season for the franchise. This is just bad all around. So I'm looking forward to next year already.
If the Niners really want, or the Niner fans that really wanted Devontae Adams, maybe Aaron Rodgers is your pathway to getting him. You never know.
Oh Jesus. We're gonna have our quarterback on freaking what's his name show every single week.
McCaffrey, then you go hire Nathaniel Hackett and bring him in. It'll be great.
Yeah, I'm sure Kyle will sign up for that.
Ayahuasca all around. It'll be awesome.
Oh my God. It would have I mean,
The dark
bring
room
back,
retreat.
bring back Jimmy. Bring them all back. Bring back Jimmy
Honestly,
G.
Nick
Bring them all
Mullins,
back. Why
CJ
not?
Beathard,
Yeah. Bring in, who was the other ones? There's CJ
Mac
Beathard.
Jones,
Freaking who's the
Brian
guy that
Hoyer.
No, not Brian Hoyer. What's his name?
Nate Sudfeld.
No, he looks just like our kicker. Quarterback.
It's not Beathard?
No, Nick Mullins. Yeah. He
Nick
has
Mullins.
a
Yeah,
striking
Mullins.
resemblance to Jake Moody. Kind of scary. So,
Jake,
I don't
just a
know.
mild manner, like, yeah, I like to miss kicks every single Sunday. God,
I'm just happy to be
so
here.
it's like, yeah, you also suck.
Yeah, it'd be tough to see him getting a job anywhere in the league if they cut him this year. You said, bring in somebody with competition and have him fight for it. Nah, bro. That's the one thing I'll fight you on. I want him out.
You're not cutting Jake
Gone.
Moody this year. You're not.
Why?
I totally understand why you'd want to. He has been terrible, as I highlighted earlier.
Ass. He's so bad.
If there's an ass, he's sucking on it. He is all up in there for sure.
He's all up in that mess.
But he's like that Jason Whitlock, Joy Taylor. You got that peanut butter skin comment earlier today.
Oh my God. That's how me and you got to get famous. We got to bring some scandal to YouTube, and then we'll get famous. That's
I got to drop a lawsuit somewhere.
Yeah, someone's getting sued. We're kidding, guys. We're joking.
But what a crazy lawsuit! Like what the heck? But nonetheless, I just think
Chris Winkie. No, Chris Heineke. Okay.
Hey, Chris Winkie was a baller back in the day in Carolina and San Francisco.
Really bad last name for any guy to to have Winkie.
You want to bring in Cody Pickett while we're at it? We can have a grand old time. Sean Hill, bring him back too. I'm sure he's out there in Detroit still somewhere. Man,
those were some.
But
bad
in regards
years.
in regards to Moody, like the one thing you can't have happen is you cut him and then he goes elsewhere and is great. And I get it. He's so bad. You're like, I don't care.
I don't think that's going to happen, but you never know. You're right.
Take Chase McLaughlin, for example, though. And I get it's one kicker, but there are so many other examples as to young kickers struggling, getting cut and going elsewhere than being a viable starter. Now, will it happen? I have no idea, but I think bringing in a viable starting caliber kicker, bring in two guys for all I care, just give, like you talk about, well, you got to push your quarterback. You got to push your kicker at this point in time because he's not getting the job done, but I don't think you're going to cut Jake Moody.
Go look that clip up when I said about pushing a quarterback. He literally made a video about that. It's like they need to sign somebody, he doesn't have any behind him to push him or scare him or something. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I love Larry, but
I love Larry too, but
he's really talented, Larry.
Somebody said Brendo was a fullback. It's like, what the heck are you talking about? I love you, man. I love you so much, Larry. We used to be coworkers. But what the heck?
Yeah, he's sometimes he's wrong. It's okay. Somebody asked me about the Dolphins. What they're doing? My brother's pissed. They're sticking with their GM and they're sticking with their coach. They are okay with mediocrity. At least, listen, guys. At least the Niners are going to try to do some stuff this offseason and make things better. Standing pat doesn't work. If they move on from their D coordinator and that's the best thing that could happen. At least the Niners are aware of their mistakes and aware of what needs to change. You could be a Dolphins fan and be like, well, next year is going to be just as bad as this year. That sucks.
True.
So
it's true. But
Some people like to complain
no
too much.
Tyreek Hill though. Tyreek Hill wants out.
Hey, question. Me and my brother were talking about this. I was like, imagine Tyreek Hill on the 49ers. That would actually be really fun.
Debo
I
for
mean,
Tyreek swap.
Debo for Tyreek swap. Can you imagine the end arounds and all that stuff we could do with him? That'd be, I mean, you know, like we'd have a viable,
just use Jacob Cowling is right there.
I know, a way cheaper. I know. I thought about it. I was like, that it kind of got me excited for a second, but you just destroyed that. So that's okay.
Where do you think he ends up, though? My mind is like, oh, he's going to be a Las Vegas Raider. No doubt. It'll be Shadur Sanders and Tyreek Hill and Deion Sanders.
Someone in the playoffs who is a perennial loser in the playoffs is probably going to make a move on someone like him next year. I would say maybe like Buffalo or something.
Denver, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't think Sean Payton wants that.
Who knows? Someone's gonna sign him. He's a good player. He's kind of a one-trick pony, but he's a really good player. He gets open.
I'm trying to think.
He's gotta have you can't use him as an underneath guy though. He's not an underneath. He's a game wrecker. He's a deep shot guy.
He's only played in the AFC though. So I'm trying to think of like where that would make sense for them.
Eagles.
I guess if they trade Devontae Smith.
Lions.
The Chargers make some sense, I guess, but Harbaugh, would he really want to deal with that? I'm trying to think of like receivers that are up on contracts. I know the guy from Cincinnati said he wants to stay. I'm forgetting his name right now. I don't know why. I said it earlier. T. Higgins. He said he wants to stay in Cincinnati. So if he stays there, like where does that leave Tyreek Hill to go? And I don't see any viable options. You know, one name I'm actually pretty intrigued about this offseason, and maybe it's next year, not this offseason, but in 2026, Kyle Pitts. I know he's not been great, but
yes,
we talk about, George Kittle and the future. Like, I'm really intrigued if Atlanta lets Kyle Pitts go if he's bad next year with Penix. Like, I know it's far away, but like I am like keeping an eye on the Kyle Pitts situation out there in Atlanta.
As someone to be kind of like an understudy to Kittle. You know, the 49ers,
he's good.
Hey, the 49ers at one point had John Franks and they had Brent Jones at the same time. So that was, Wesley Walls, and I think Wesley Walls was there too. And you could have two tight ends. You could have two. That would be amazing. I mean,
well, don't forget the Jim Harbaugh classic of Vernon Davis and Billy Badgema. Exactly.
People loved
Delaney Walker.
He had stone hands though. He was not a great catcher.
I love Delaney Walker.
I love him as a person.
Woo!
Yeah, I'm a Vernon Davis. I always thought he was a really good tight end until he got Kittle, and I was just like, wow. Like greatest tight end in 49er history. I mean, it's a landslide. It's not even close.
I think Kittle is only 10 touchdowns away from surpassing Davis. And if he does that, he'll be in the top 5 of all-time receptions, touchdowns, and receiving yards when it's all said and done.
That's amazing.
It's pretty good. Hall of Famer.
Yeah. Hey, Kittle's a Hall of Famer, no doubt. So is Christian McCaffrey if he keeps playing. Personally, I think Christian McCaffrey's a Hall of Famer. It's just what they do in healthy, what they do to a team, as far as what they do for a team and what they mean defensively. Bad news. So hopefully we get all those guys back healthy next year. But I had fun, man. I'll do this again with you down the road. Hopefully, when you're so busy, all the guys are busy. Like I said, I asked Shasky. He wants to do something. I know everybody has life and married. Some people have kids. Some people coach. Some people do radio and coach and have kids. And it's just like insane. So whenever I get a chance to have you on, it's always a joy. You said it before, like if we only made it a half-hour show, it goes by pretty fast. So I wanted to get a day where we could go. We went an hour and 45 minutes. So
there you go.
Everybody, thank you for coming through. If you were on, most people for me were on Twitter. So thanks for coming through Twitter. I will see you guys hopefully later this week with my normal Monday crew. We're going to kind of do a similar show. We're kind of like, talk out the rest, kind of a recap for the season. And until then, everybody take care, stay safe, and go Niners. Peace.